What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with my fantabulistic co-host, Grant Hughes. We are going to tackle our biggest question for every NBA team over the course of what will be a 4-podcast series, each conference split into 2 podcasts. We are on to the Western Conference first, where we will cut it off. We're going in alphabetical order, so we'll cut it off after 7 or 8 teams. I will split it into 2 episodes. That's just the warning. Before we get started, the usual reminder, and please subscribe to us wherever you consume us. If this is your first time checking us out, give us that permanent sub on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Hit the sub button on YouTube, like, comment to help the algorithm love us back. Join our Discord. The link is in every single podcast and YouTube description. Our socials are either on the screen if you're watching our beautiful shining faces and my very large S forehead, or go into the podcast or YouTube description and you'll find the social media handles there. Before we get started, the actual biggest question I have, Grant, how are you doing?
Well, Jordan Poole is all better now after had a great game last night, and James Wiseman is going to the G League. So those were 2 expected and not the worst results. So I'm doing great.
Overdue, if we're talking about Jordan Poole actually getting better. I gave him a D when I gave it. And you know what? I gave him a C minus, and you talked me into a D.
I talked you down. You down. That's all. It was all part of the plan.
This exercise is always fascinating because what's tough about covering the entire league is how do you actually thoroughly cover the entire league? Our mailbags and stuff are great, but I feel like once a month, it's always good to throw in the exercise like, oh, what have we observed or curious about with these teams? We came up with a super original idea to just have a question about each team. I've never heard any podcast or content creator do anything like this. So this is just really groundbreaking, innovative stuff that I'm excited our dozens of listeners get to hear or see if they're on YouTube.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, if we could figure out like an alliterative rebrand, like Truth or Trash or Peace or Panic for this, I think maybe everybody would be fooled. but also, I think shout out to the people that have been providing our mailbag questions, because a lot of them, the challenge for me, I don't know about you, for this exercise was not just answering this, because we've hit the big questions in a lot of cases, because that's what people have been curious about. So we've had to find some new slants, I think, or try to. But yeah, shout out to you guys, because the listeners have been, obviously, as you'd expect, if you're asking about a specific team, you really care about it. But they've really been, finger on the pulse of the big issues for almost all of these teams. If we've had any questions, they at least touched on the things we're going to get to today, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, for sure. And like the hot or not will come back because Discord asked for it. And it's been all of our Discord members. So one, if you want to ask questions or direct the content, because Grant and I are both of the mind, like the listeners should really, I guess not mandate is a terrible word, but we want your input and we want to talk about what you guys want us to talk about. So head in there. But I do need to like throw out a Twitter solicit. Like I used to do a Twitter mailbag and then like a Discord mailbag, and I'd either separate them or combine them. I haven't done anything from Twitter because the Discord questions have been so profuse in number and also just so great. So yeah, I echo what Grant said. Shout out to the Discord members and our listeners in general. We are going to alternate teams. It was a little dangerous because we didn't double check that we went right, because we've done this before where we've alternated, and I think it's happened where like I've chosen the wrong team and then you've chosen the wrong team. So this is going to be, if there's a mess up and we both did like Denver at some point, this is going to get very interesting.
Yeah, get ready for some vamping, because if we get to the Rockets and you're expecting me to do it, sorry, man. But yeah, let's just get into it. I started with the Dallas Mavericks. And we won't do this for every team, but since none of this will change for them based on their schedule, they're 7-5, plus 3.4 net rating. This is all per Cleaning the Glass. They're top 10 in both offense and defense, just barely. So a lot of those are skewed because they blew the Grizzlies out by like 41 early in the season. And so they haven't been quite that good. I think they've been outscored net over the rest of their games, if you exclude that one. And so my question for them is, how do they, or how can the Mavs do something to change the way they rely so much on Luka Doncic? And that's been the question really since it was clear that he was going to be an ascendant superstar MVP candidate perennially, which is again the case this year. But his usage rate is, on pace to be a top 5 figure, top 3, maybe even, I think, when I was looking these numbers up yesterday. And so with that has been the other sort of hand-in-hand story of he wears down over the course of games. His first half, second half splits, all his field goal, 3-point shooting, it dips. You can even break it down by quarters. The trend lines are sort of really just unmistakable. He wears down, and it's almost to the point where if he has a great first half, or if it's like 29 points on, 11 of 14 shooting, and he just looks unstoppable, you can almost bank on that second half not looking anything like that. So the real highs come with the real lows. There's a finite amount of energy that everyone has, and Luka's just doesn't last for the full game, and you can stretch that out over a full season. So what do they do, right? Like, you lost Jalen Brunson. Spencer Dinwiddie has been really good. He's one option. Christian Wood is still coming off the bench. He's the other. I don't know how much more you can really ask of either of those guys. Maybe Dinwiddie a little bit, but because Wood defensively hurts the team, he doesn't seem to be likely to get off the bench in terms of his role going forward. So I just wonder, like, is this just a gap year, right? Where the guy that's going to come in and sort of de-escalate the heliocentric approach just isn't here yet, which kind of sucks because Luka's already this good. We talk about, we're wasting a year of this guy all the time with respect to LeBron or the Warriors core. It feels early to do that for Doncic, but I mean, he is what he is. He's great. And I think, just stepping all the way back before I flip it to you to see what you think, guys with these high usage rates, if you just look back over the top 20, 25, those teams don't win titles. Like, it does not work. And Luka is great. He deserves to have, maybe the highest usage rate in the league, certainly top 5. But this is not, based on history, the way you're going to really ultimately succeed. So I know I'm posing a question and I'm not giving a lot of answers, but I think it's because the Mavs just aren't built to have someone, or to play in a way that sort of takes the burden off Luka, to the degree that I think it would have to, for them to be taken seriously as a contender.
I would echo everything you said, and I wouldn't have an answer because of the way their roster is built. And the only thing I think you could do, and Zach Lowe mentioned this, is try playing Dinwiddie, Luka, and Christian Wood together, because those are your 3 guys who can dribble. But the defense has been a disaster during that time, and they've decided they don't want to play it. I think they've logged fewer than 50 possessions together this season. My question, and I have an answer, I've already talked about this, but I think because Luka has been so ultra historically high usage, people are wondering whether he can even play a different way. We had YouTube commenters saying that he's a terrible passer, which is just like, I guess if you think he should pass more, he's 3rd in potential assists this season, by the way. The Mavericks are converting less than 50% of their looks off his passes. Now, are those late shot clock bombs? I didn't dig into it too much. Still, I personally think that it's a fair question to wonder, can he play a different way? Because I think we've seen James Harden's made some tweaks, not necessarily so much in Philly, before he was injured, but not so much. But when you looked at how he played with Russell Westbrook at points, or even Chris Paul, can Luka make a bigger adjustment though? And my answer would be yes, just because like we've seen what he does in the post, and he can, even more so than a Harden or a Westbrook, I think, can be used as a screener. But it's also a fair question because the Mavs, and this leads to like what your answer, it's why you can't provide an answer. They've never been built for Luka to be anything other than epically high usage.
I wonder too, it does seem clear, and there have been a lot of reports about this over the years, that Dallas, understandably, really caters to whatever Luka wants. And it's possible he wants to play this way, even if the results have been he wears down and Dallas has a sort of ceiling on it for that reason. And maybe the Mavs, maybe Jason Kidd has approached him. I mean, Jason Kidd of all people understands like moving the ball and sharing the offensive burden is the way to go. Maybe Luka just wants to do this and thinks he can, and has a lot of evidence suggesting that he's right based on his production individually. But that's another aspect of it, is like, I don't know, Harden didn't change until he sort of had to, right? Like, until the Houston thing ran its course and he changed teams and things look different. I wonder if Luka's ready to change the way that he plays too.
I will say that if he's not, or if this is how he wants to play, like, you need, part of running a team is like, you do have to keep like the star egos in check. It's what came back with the Lakers and LeBron and Pelinka. Okay, if LeBron wanted Russ and supported it, fine. But Rob Pelinka's job, his entire job is to manage the team and be able to make the tough calls of like, no, LeBron, you're fucking wrong. Mm-hmm. And so someone needs to, whether it's Jason Kidd, or like it's not going to be Mark Cuban. If it's going to be the front office, Nico Harrison, someone needs to come in and just say, hey, no, we're not going to play this way. We're already, should have said the goal was 5 minutes per team. We're already a little bit over. The one thing I wanted to say, and I think you were leading to it, is they're not really built to make a trade right now either, because they need to be able to guarantee first round picks. And while their top 10 protected first will go to New York this season, the soonest you can convey a pick at this very moment is 2025. And there's just not as much flash in there as if you're able to convey more immediate. They could offer a 2024 like conditional swap, I guess, but when it's conditional on what's happening with the Knicks, you almost have to wait until this offseason to make the mega trade unless a star demands to be moved to Dallas specifically.
Right. Yeah.
That leaves me to tackle the Golden State Warriors. I'm just kidding. I wanted to see if
my heart jumped when you said that.
At least we cover the Denver Nuggets. The discussion we had about, I can't remember who asked the question about whether they should make a trade, was wildly destroyed on YouTube. People were pissed off and claimed that we don't watch the Nuggets, in case you were wondering, Grant.
Ooh, interesting.
But so the Nuggets, my overarching question is, what is their defense? Because they are 6th in points allowed per possession since they started 2-2. However, when you look at the schedule, like it hasn't been, they just played the Bulls, they just played the Celtics. So it's gotten a little harder, but they were like, oh, they played the Thunder, they played the Lakers, they played the Spurs in there. And you dig into, these are numbers while they're 6th in points allowed per possession. They are 24th in the share of shots allowed at the rim and 26th in actual rim defense. They are also dead last on the season in points allowed per possession after they miss a shot. When you look at some of the lineups, the starters, and then the lineup where it's the starters, no MPJ, but Bruce Brown, and then even the lineup where it's Jamal Murray hasn't been in it, but you've inserted Bruce Brown anyway. So like it's KCP, Brown, and Gordon, and MPJ and Jokic. Those lineups have all been fine to really good defensively. Their point differentials are absurd. So I went back and I actually watched the Nuggets for this, which is something we don't do on this podcast with the Nuggets or any other team. The ball containment is an actual issue. And I don't fault Nikola Jokic specifically. Like, yeah, he's playing higher up in a lot of instances, but when you look at the Nuggets, when they're in like the other team is in transition or semi-transition, guys are just, their bodies aren't turned to make stops. They're not sets. Even also in some of the bench units too, like guys have just been getting by the players who are supposed to be containing the ball. I think we've seen a lot with, Bones Highland from the weak side of the court. And then you don't have the players, whether Jokic is on the floor or not, behind these guys who are making, MPJ does it sometimes, but like if it's Jamal Murray and MPJ on the court and like those are the two guys guarding the corner, the communication there doesn't seem like it's been great. People who watch the Nuggets more than I do might be able to say whether that's an actual issue or not. I'm just curious, what is their defense? Because they were my title pick. Should have led with that. So maybe Nuggets fans didn't tune out right now. I want to know what their defense is, because they're still, this is how much early season noise can skew stats. They're still 24th in points allowed per possession on defense, even though they've been 6th since those initial 4 games. I want to know what their defense is and whether I have faith that it's going to have another level come playoff time against the elite teams. And my honest answer is I look at the personnel and I can see some of the vision and it getting better, but I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that we'd gone into the numbers super closely when we discussed this last time. This is totally the issue for Denver. I think however you want to frame it, the defense is the issue because offense is just never going to be a problem. I think we did sort of think it was strange that a team that brought in, a couple of, higher profile defensive minded free agents was just still having a problem keeping ball handlers in front of them. I just think it's going to level out a little bit. I do think that the offseason moves were right. Sorry. I think those are the types of moves you needed to make.
KCP's been fantastic overall for them too. So
I'm open. I'm amenable to the idea that KCP is now overrated defensively, but I don't think that's the same as saying he's going to be a bad defender all year. I think him and Brown should be fine. I think Gordon is fine to plus, or at least has that reputation. And I just think some of it is, again, you have limitations with Jokic. I know this has been just like just a sore spot because depending on where you fall on the Jokic and Nuggets allegiance spectrum, you're going to either point out the things that he's not good at defensively, of which there are several, or you're going to say, he's gotten a lot better and some of the numbers say that he's actually really good defensively. How you square that with, well, this team upgraded its perimeter defense and its rim protection still sucks, I'm not sure. I think the way that he has to be used, like he can't ever be in a drop because it's just like he's a pylon. He's not going to deter stuff at the rim. We learned that. Mike Malone has tried that. You certainly can't switch him. So he has to come up to the level and either tag or he has to be out away from the basket. And when your biggest player is away from the basket, it just gets harder to defend the rim in rotation. So I think some of it's just structural and like, I'm sure Jokic has improved and some of the numbers say he's great. I'm just not convinced. I think, and the longer you have the same issue with your defense, the smarter other teams get about attacking it. What is this defense? I mean, league average best case, I think. And that's a pretty big climb from where it is right now. If they finish 15th and this offense is still top 5, that's a whole bunch of wins. And then, maybe a playoff series or two. Ultimately, if you want to go zoom all the way out, I think the way that the Nuggets defend is like the thing that's going to prevent them from being a serious contender. It is what it is at this point. We have a lot of information over several years, and the improvements this year should help. I don't know if it's going to help enough.
And I'm also like, is this faux concern if your best and most used lineups when it's going to matter most are killing it? Again,
Right.
I need to see like the level of competition increase like over a longer period of span for them. And I will say anecdotally, it feels like Aaron Gordon might lead the league in like passive aggressive what the fuck stares after the Nuggets just give up these like parades to the basket. There's like there's of what I was watching, there was just a lot of moments where he looked miffed, and one of them was just like against the Bulls, where he didn't really contain the ball, and the Bulls were in semi-transition. I can't remember if it was Ayo Dosunmu or if it was I don't remember who it was, but it was just I was watching so many possessions, and they just like blew right by him, got to the rim, and he was like semi glaring at Jokic and Murray and MPJ at the same time. If it was just like, so I honestly, I don't know. The Nuggets are my title pick. I thought that was going to work, but you even just breaking down like the way that you have to play Jokic, that doesn't mean he's the primary problem. It means the guys behind him need to be like able to defend that way, and have the Nuggets found that just yet. It could improve as Murray and MPJ get like, let's say, healthier. And MPJ still retains his like defensive playmaking ceiling, but yeah, the whole point of this exercise is to ask questions we don't have answers to, and I have no answer to this one.
Right. Well, I have an answer for this one, and yours might be different. Yours probably is different. So we have the Golden State Warriors next. Is it time to scrap 2 timelines? Very simple. James Wiseman being in the G League for the next 10 plus days, I think, is a little data point that I think really matters. So my answer, though, is no, but it's for a different reason than it used to be.
I'm interested how you spin this.
Yeah. So, well, it's a really simple one now, and so if you're saying scrap the 2 timelines, it means you're starting to look really seriously at trades, right? For Wiseman, Kuminga, even Moody, Poole. No, one you can't, but the investment is already made in him. This would just be selling low, right? I mean, you just sent Wiseman to the G League. You can't, like, what is his value? And he's going to make 12 something.
We did have a Pistons fan ask.
Okay, are we going to talk about this one?
All right, well, we'll skate over it then.
No. So the proposal was Wiseman and Kuminga for Diallo and who?
Nerlens Noel.
Nerlens Noel, sure. So great example of, I think their value might be a little pressed right now.
I don't mean to insult who asked the question. They were legitimately asking, and I appreciate the question. It's to prove your point that yes, you would be selling low.
If you were someone that didn't watch the Warriors or follow them closely, you would look at Wiseman's production and how he's hurt the team, and you'd look at Kuminga being in and out of the rotation, and you'd say, well, these guys aren't helpful. Why would they, like, that's not it from that perspective.
Who watches the Warriors, I have a lot of the same sentiments, at least with Wiseman, to be
That's true. No, so I think it's just the wrong time, but I do think we've talked about this before. It's clear to me now that Wiseman, and to a lesser extent Kuminga, will not be able to help win the title this year. Certainly not Wiseman. Kuminga could be like a 15. He could be like in last year's role, where he actually does help in a limited role against the right opponents, somewhat inconsistently. But it's just, You can't do it now. You need Wiseman to go down to the G League. You need him to come back up and actually be like a net neutral guy, right? Because then you start looking more at the potential. It's really hard to care about what he's going to be like when he's 25 if he's just destroying your differential every time he's on the floor. So I mean, the other thing is that the starters continue to be really good. Poole finally looked like Jordan Poole last night. And granted, it was against the Spurs. I think there's just a lot of upside from even the other guys. Like I think Klay Thompson will be better. He's never going to be like a fringe all-star again, but I think he can improve. So just personally, I'm staying patient kind of because you have to now. Because like if a great trade were on the table, I'm sure you'd have to think about pulling the trigger for Wiseman. But selling at the lowest value just doesn't make sense. And I think there's a reason to believe that anyone that the Warriors might be thinking about moving on from, with respect to like the guys that are the phase 2 of the timeline or whatever. It's just not the time. I think those guys will improve their value. At the very least, I don't think their value is going to get worse. So that's where I'm at on that one.
So if you're not moving those guys, what does not catering to 2 timelines look like then? Because if you're not playing Wiseman, if you're only committing to playing Kuminga X amount of minutes per game, same with Moody, like those are spots in the rotation then that could be going to players who can log more minutes. And so you're not willing to make a trade or sell low, which I totally understand. So what does it even look like? Even when you're not playing or actively developing these guys, you're still committing to 2 timelines by having them on the roster. And I understand it's the marketplace dictates whether you would even consider moving them. And a friend of the podcast, Mort, wrote an article today that he thinks the Warriors should trade for John Collins. And I don't know how you feel about that fit. I thought it was just like, given the Warriors' defensive issues this year, I also so I'm with you in that you need to choose a timeline, but they've almost made the decision by virtue of still having these guys. Not that you have to move them, but I guess the way they fleshed out the rest of the roster was very much at least 2 of these guys are going to be able to contribute to winning this season.
Yeah, no, that's right. That was totally the expectation. I think, the Warriors lose Gary Payton and Otto Porter. Kuminga certainly could come in and give you 85% of what Porter did, right? Like that was a totally reasonable expectation because Porter really didn't play a lot, but they missed so much of what both of those guys brought. I mean, Payton, just from an energy standpoint, it's very apparent that the Warriors played a 100-game season last year, especially among everyone except Steph. Looks just this is all, we'd like to be more quantitative and analytical than this, but a lot of the Warriors struggles are just the guys, just the sense of urgency is not really there. There's some fatigue, there's some element of we don't really need to go as hard as we can right now. That's a factor too. But yeah, like I guess so to answer your question, I mean, Dante DiVincenzo needs to stay healthy and be better. He wasn't very good last night, and in a game that most of the Warriors looked pretty good. And now you're talking about JaMychal Green's back in the rotation. He's going to play center, Steve Kerr said, which is the right choice. But then when Wiseman comes back, he's now 4th on that center depth chart, 5th maybe if you count Draymond Green, because Anthony Lamb has earned a rotation role, which is insane because he couldn't make the Rockets. So you're just going to lean on guys you didn't really expect to lean on. And then you just hope that what you thought would happen with Kuminga and Moody and Wiseman, the Wiseman is the long shot, kind of comes to fruition some point midway through the year where, oh yeah, Kuminga can come in and the mistakes diminish and he's making energy plays and running the floor and being the best athlete out there. Like that's realistic to me, I think, but it's a lower bar than you'd like for those guys to have to clear to sort of, count as successes.
I think I'm with everything you said. I do believe, though, and this is probably a decision you make over the offseason, once Jordan Poole's extension kicks in, it's going to be time to start looking at, well, how do we consolidate this if we're actually want to contend with? Because if you want to be committed to the second timeline, I think it's the wrong call. I'm maximizing Steph because his title window is guaranteed right now. He's one of the 3 best players in the NBA at the moment. I still had him 5th, tied for 5th on my latest MVP ballot, even though the Warriors are under 500.
Right.
Guess what? Wins aren't a player stat. So I just, in the middle of the season, I don't see, maybe they get lucky on the buyout market. It's just sort of like, because I don't know where the upgrade come. Even if you're thinking someone becomes available, like it's so much harder a lot of the players that might come they would be upgrades over Jordan Poole is my point. Like if Bradley Beal entered the trade market, he's someone who can actually uplift the lineups without Steph. And maybe Poole starts to do that. He was bad to start the year. you can't really trade Poole right now because of the way his contract's set up. And so I think you're just implicitly committed to the 2 timelines through this season, and you sort of have to take your medicine. And look, they're lucky. You have 4 titles in the bank. I get it. But like, you're lucky Steph is Steph because he's so low maintenance. If I was him, I'd be pretty annoyed.
Yeah. I think you'd never know it if he didn't, but I think there is some indication that he does believe that this is going to work. I think because, it worked. It more or less worked last year. It's not like, they dabbled with it a little bit. Wiseman getting hurt was like maybe kind of put
a godsend. Like what?
Yeah. But didn't force them to really soberly evaluate what kind of player he is right now. But yeah, no, the time to do it, if you're going to dump the 2 timeline plan was, before this season for sure, right. Maybe at some point last year.
Banner pace for us right now. Let's see if we can pick that up with the Houston Rockets. I have so many questions about the Houston Rockets, but I decided to focus on Alperen Şengün, and I kind of just want to know why don't they play through him more? And also, will he continue to start once Bruno Fernando is healthy? We had someone ask, I don't have it with me in the Discord. I bookmarked it for a future mailbag. Actually asked, like, can you investigate why they don't want to start him or why they think that's the right call? Jalen Green is their most important player long-term. Alperen Şengün is their best player right now. And the numbers for him are just absolutely through the roof this year. And he's doing it he's starting now, and his minutes compared to last year are up. He's still just not playing enough. And he's at 16.1 points, 1.9 assists, shooting 62.6% on twos. The fact that what's really weird about his case this year is he's such a great passer, but he has more turnovers than assists. I think a lot of that is playing time noise, the team that he plays for. When you dig into his game, though, he's averaging 4.1 elbow touches. That's like fewer than Brandon Clark right now. It's still higher relative to the league average, but he's good. Like, let him facilitate from the elbows. He's at like 4.3. He's finishing anyway, 3.4 post ups per game. He's averaging 1.17 points per post up possession right now. The Rockets as an offensive team are at 1.08 overall. So an Alperen Şengün post up might be your most efficient offense right now anyway. He's shooting 63% on them. Will he stick in the starting 5? I think that he just should. And is it time to change the starting 5 overall, even beyond having him in there? I know I'm not saying bench Jabari Smith Jr. because you're concerned about them long-term, but it's like, do you need to start KPJ with Jalen Green? And I know some people might think it's a rush to put KPJ off the bench, but it's just like that lineup, their starting lineups are getting absolutely like hammered. And this team is, first of all, it's not good. It's 2-12. It's not good. And I understand it's not necessarily built to be good, but when you look at the Rockets, there's just not really a discernible identity to me there. You have Jalen Green's incredible speed, which he doesn't seem to know how to really slow down at sometimes. His ridiculous shot making. There are times where I feel like they let Jabari Smith Jr. do too much. He should be more of a play finisher. And then yet you're not letting Alperen Şengün do enough. And then it's like, if you're not going to slow things down, and this, by the way, maybe I would argue or not argue this as passionately, let's say, if they had like a floor general on the roster. They don't. Like, you've decided that KPJ or Jalen Green, like, those are the guys that you're going to develop in that context. I think that's also unfair to both of them. I don't think they're those players. And we've seen like lots of flashes from Jalen Green for sure, but he's not the slow it down orchestrate. Like, he doesn't seem to know how to operate on any other speed other than 11. And then just sort of finally here, if you're not going to play the way of slow it down, like, okay, well then why can't this team actually play fast? They're like semi slow is the best way for me to classify them. It's like, why can't you push the pace more after grabbing a defensive rebound? It's like Jalen Green sometimes wants to slow it down and then uptick it in the half court, which, yeah, there can be a benefit to a lot of the time, but it's so confusing to me. And I don't want to focus on, because we've talked about it, what I feel is like an overall lack of identity. And like, you look at the personnel on this roster, it's like, okay, well, why are they 26th in average possession time after grabbing a defensive board? If they're not playing throughout for Şengün. But the Şengün stuff is, can they like rely on him more when it's not even just play. He should play as many minutes as you can get from him, but like, can you rely on him more when he's on the court?
Yeah, I think anytime there's lots of reasons for this when a team just isn't playing as fast as you think it should, and there's different ways to measure it. If you're talking about actual length of offensive possession versus like transition frequency, those are two pretty different stats that have, are affected by a lot of different variables that don't necessarily overlap. But I think a lot of times, so a team like the Rockets that you said it, like their primary ball handlers are Jalen Green and KPJ. And I don't think of either of those guys as having the experience or like intuition really at this stage to sort of make the quick decisions and the quick one pass reads where, oh, this defender is 3 steps this way when he should be there. And if I pass it here, this generates us a shot, like, within either right away or another pass away. Like that's just seeing, you hear guys talk about just seeing the pictures all the time. You need to see enough pictures to sort of recognize patterns and know if the floor looks like this and I go here or throw it there, this is what's going to happen. And that's just like, that's inexperience. So, but to your point, Sengun is someone that, like, look, the Rockets win his minutes, like, which is wild. They're plus 2.9 with him on the floor, and all of that's offense because the defense goes in the tank. So this is not new to anyone who's aware of the scouting report on him, going back to pre-draft. He's a really gifted offensive big, and the post-up numbers are really impressive. He makes a ton of shots this year, which is a big difference in like the just, that weird, awkward floater, long hook, 3 to 10 foot range. He's making like 60 something % of those shots this year, which is no way to live, but it's indicative of his skill. I think it's just inexperience. Like I watched some of the Clippers Rockets game just on Monday night, and Jalen Green used a Euro step, and the broadcast was like made a point of saying, that's unusual. So that's just, he doesn't have the craft yet. He doesn't slow down. You're right. And Sengun on a post up, he's a good post up player. Zubac just pulled the chair. Just the classic, like he got one shoulder bump. He knew Sengun was coming with a second one, moved out of the way, turnover. So I think a lot of it is the Rockets just need to be willing to live with Sengun turning the ball over. I think, there's all these stats about young point guards that one indicator of a guy potentially being a really good point guard down the line is he turns it over a lot as a rookie because he's like trying stuff. He sees things and he's trying stuff. So I'm not bothered by the more turnovers than assists. I think he should play a ton. I think they should run it through him almost everywhere, because what's Jalen Green's like best attribute? It's just he's fast. He's really fast. So just have him get a running start and play some handoff game and just let those two guys figure it out. I think Sengun is, I'm not the biggest Domas Sabonis fan, but like there's a lot of that in him. And I think maybe not the brute strength, but like you can run an offense through a guy like that. I think the Rockets might want to consider that a little more.
I do wonder if they have to change the lineup context in which he plays sometimes, though. And that leads me, I'm going to wrap up with this. 50 post-ups per Sengun this year so far. That's per NBA.com. I honestly thought it was more, but 50 post-ups for Alperen Sengun. How many assists does he have, if you had to ballpark a number?
On 50 post-up, it can't be high because his per game is like 1.9. I'm going to say like 7.
0.
Oh, hey, cut, guys. Somebody cut. That's in pickup where the big guy's really pissed off that no one's cutting and he's got nowhere to go.
He's passing on 24% of his post-ups. He has 4 turnovers against 0 assists. I went and looked that up because I was like, when I was going through, I was like, there's like something feels off here. And 0. I felt like that number was wrong, but I was like, well, that's also might be right. It might be right.
That's damning of everyone but him, because I'm going to go pro Sengun big time on this. Those guys need to cut or make themselves available for spot ups. And then the coaching staff has got to install something where like, it's not just 4 other dudes looking at him trying to post up Zubats and getting the chair pulled. Like that's not going to work.
Yeah, I wanted to save that for the end because it was just so baffling to me.
Unbelievable. All right, so I have the LA Clippers. What's wrong with the offense besides Kawhi Leonard not being there? So some of this is going to be skewed because they played the Rockets on Monday, and these numbers are from before that game. But they were 30th in offensive rating prior to getting the Rockets a generous defense. They're bottom 5 in what their effective field goal percentage ought to be based on the shot locations they're getting. They deserve to be there because that's sort of where they are in frequency from the rim and at the rim and from the corners on threes, which like, that's a quick and dirty way to just be like, what's your shot profile look like? And if you're an average shooting team, how good are you going to be? They're dead last in corner 3-point percentage. Again, this is from before the Rockets game. You'd expect that to normalize, but I think a huge talking point last year was, the Clippers just couldn't miss a three. They were one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league all year. So just the shooting is an issue. I think it'll settle in somewhere between the high 20% and the low 40s, but you're not getting the low 40s again, I don't think, just because almost nobody does that. In terms of their offensive profile, they isolate a ton, and they're not very good at it. 3rd overall in frequency, 34th percentile in efficiency. They're number 25 or number 29 in spot up frequency, which is another cheap way to, that's what you want, a lot of spot up. You want a lot of off screen stuff. They're also in the 34th percentile in points per play of that play type. They get nothing in handoff and cuts. They just don't utilize that type of offense. They're bottom 5-ish in drives per game, so they're not getting into the paint. Their paint touches are low. They're second to last in passes per game, so the ball's not moving. It's kind of like if you're just asking, what kind of signs would you want to see in a bad offense? They're just ticking boxes like up and down the list of what's things that are really bad omens for, this will be okay eventually. So I think a lot of it is just the personnel. And this was a team built with a billion wings that are just dependent scorers around 2-star offensive options. And Paul George is the only one that's playing. And he's bringing the ball up a ton last night. He's great at that. Paul George continues to be just like underrated. He's really good. But if he's the only guy that's going to, split a double team or, operate well in the pick and roll, get into the paint and get the ball moving, that's too much. That's too much for him to handle. And when the ball gets kicked out to say like Nick Batum, yeah, he'll make the right pass if he's covered, but he's not going to blow by and trigger another breakdown and get the defense into rotation. And they just don't have enough guys that can do that. John Wall theoretically could, but he's not playing enough. He was out last night too. I just think a lot of it is they don't have the personnel to have the body movement or player movement to score that way. And individual shot creation wise, without Kawhi, there's like one dude that really is going to do anything. So I think the offense is a real problem. I think Kawhi coming back obviously sort of fixes everything, but I think we've discussed several times, I don't know why you'd bank on that at this point. So it's oddly for a team whose roster construction we just lauded because they just hoarded everybody that was 6'7" and could defend and shoot. It's kind of, is it possible you can have too many? Maybe they actually did prove that you can have too many 3-and-D like combo forward types because they're just not generating enough high expected value shots with the personnel they have.
Yeah, and I think we've seen Reggie Jackson start to normalize a little bit with his shooting, which is good. Norman Powell has come up from absolute rock bottom, but is still super low. The Clippers are shooting 10 percentage points worse from 3 when he's on the court this year. And I think a lot of it comes back to shooting. I don't know if it's definitely the roster construction to me and it's so weird to just have this conversation knowing that Kawhi really hasn't played. And so that is a big part of it, but also what about Kawhi's recent history makes you think that you could have banked on him being available for more than like 55 games or whatever it was this season anyway? You look at the roster construction, I'm not sure if it's just they skew too far towards the wing, like end of the spectrum, but it wouldn't help if you had more bigs. It's really just a matter of did they not get enough self-starters or offensive initiators? And that the answer is probably yes. And it's not even so much, they don't need another Paul George or Kawhi, like that type of initiator. It just feels like they need an offensive quarterback where it's John Wall can bring some of it and maybe a little bit of like a change in cadence, but his change in cadence is more abrupt to me where it's like, he'll get you like that full floor speed. Yes. But in terms of the half court speed, it's still there for them. But is he the settle down guy that you want to break down defenses? And so it makes me wonder, like leading into the trade deadline, they can trade 1 first-round pick right now. Are they a team? Like when you're starting to look at some of the salaries they have, that should be going after Mike Conley. Feels like that would be a perfect fit for this roster. And I don't know if that would address all their issues, but And I don't know that you're giving up a 2029 first round pick to get Mike Conley. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
But like, it does feel like they need that type of a presence. Maybe it's even like with a Monte Morris. Let's even think about a little bit lower end. How far would he go on a roster like this? And part of me feels like, oh, are we oversimplifying this? But it's also like, could we be overcomplicating it too because Kawhi's not there? But also, when is Kawhi going to be there? And so there are a few teams I've not been able to get a hold on, and the Clippers are sort of one of them. I'm concerned, but like, I almost can't put my finger on. I can put my finger on why, but I don't see their path. Like, I don't see their path out of it, but I also do. It's just I don't know if they should overreact, is my point, to what's happened through the first, 12, 15% of the season, however long it's been.
To your point, I think we're not having this conversation if they're shooting league average from three. I think, because then their offensive rating is like, oh, it's okay. And then once Kawhi's back, it's fine. We're not worried so much about the personnel grouping. And that'll come up. It's just, if you're looking for a fatal flaw in a team that was projected to be a title favorite, I think by some, like, it's just, the offense is a little clunky or a lot clunky. And it's a lot of it's because the best guy is not out there, but a lot of it's because just, they're not set up to have, a second guy pierce the defense and start a, cascading effect of defensive mistakes where you get easy ones. So you're having to make a lot of threes, and they're not doing that right now.
I do wonder, is there like something to the effect of, do they need more people who are better screeners? And is that part of the reason why, like, when a Vicha Zubac is off the floor, their offensive rating just is, I guess it's actually worse when he's on the court too. So I shouldn't even say that. They have a 104 offensive rating with him, and they're at 110.3 without him. So never mind. I guess playing with space. Those are both below average offensive ratings, by the way.
Yeah.
He's just been so good this season. I would have assumed it's a lot higher.
Yeah.
The next team is me, and it's the Lakers. I don't know what other question we're supposed to ask other than, do you trade Russell Westbrook if you're them at this point? I will say, since he's come off the bench, he has been a lot better. 18.3 points, 8.1 assists against 4.4 turnovers, shooting better than 41% from three on 4 attempts per game, 46.5% on twos. He's getting more of his shots inside the restricted area. About half of them are coming there, up from 42% before. The Lakers are minus 41 in his minutes, though, which is the second worst plus minus on the team, in front of only LeBron James, ironically, who's dealing with a hip injury at the moment. It's still a question, because I feel like I've answered it in both refrains of, well, at this point, I would just eat this season, because no trade you make is going to turn you into a contender. So holster those picks, holster your cap space, and then figure it out this summer. Reevaluate. Do you trade AD? Are you able to sign someone and run it back? Then I'm also just like, well, what are we doing here? You still have LeBron, who has not been like LeBron. It was like he was fine to start the season, and then it sort of felt like it went downhill. I honestly don't like, and is there a way, like, well, if you can trade one first round pick, like if you could do the Turner Buddy Hield trade for one first round pick, my logic says that you do it. And then, though, I was listening to Zach Lowe the other day argue against, like, you shouldn't do that because that's a half-ass measure. And so I kind of get that stance too. And just knowing where the Lakers are, knowing how brutal the West is going to be. And by the way, it's more brutal than we expected, at least in terms of margin for error, because the Jazz and the Blazers weren't supposed to be here this late, like into the early part of the season. Even the Spurs were friskier for a second. And there are teams that are underachieving right now. When you look at the Timberwolves, maybe throw the Pelicans in there a little bit, that you would expect to get, the Warriors, of course, that you would expect to get better. So it's almost harder if you're starting from your position of weakness to build back up. And so you need to make this decision soon. It's not, oh, well, let's wait to 20 games into the season to see whether the trade market develops. Then, however, I come back to the point that, all right, even if the trade market develops, who are you outbidding for players that other teams want? Maybe because your picks are going to be these gems down the line, at least teams think, especially if they're unprotected in 27 and 29. You can get a Miles Turner. You'll have the best offer for Miles Turner. But if you have the best offer, it's probably because you're overpaying for a player other teams weren't willing to give up as much for. But if a Bradley Beal does come on the trade market, you're not going to have the best offer. He has a no trade clause. That would be your best bet of getting Bradley Beal. And sort of looming over all this, like LeBron and the AD minutes without Russ, they've not been like world beaters this season. And so can we just get, who are you replacing him with where you're going to guarantee that this works out? Are you able to get Kyrie Irving for just Russ at this point? And just what type of message does that send? LeBron immediately walking back his criticism of Kyrie was just such a bullshit move. I don't care. There are probably fair questions to ask about his to-do list and why Joe Tsai has to be sort of the arbiter of morality here, when I don't want to be the whataboutist, but it's also fair to criticize like this, Joe Tsai stance on like certain human rights issues. So I understand the inquiry there, but like we're dealing with Kyrie Irving promoting an anti-Semitic docuseries, then refusing to walk it back on multiple occasions. Don't defend him, but I was almost just like, oh, he's like, he looked at the Lakers depth chart and that's what he's doing. So I don't know what the Lakers do or what I would do. I always default towards, because I said this with the Warriors, you have LeBron, so you go for it. But like going for it, I don't know what that looks like for them, because even the players they have access to, I don't think gets them to where you want to be if you're making that type of a move.
Right. Yeah. Not a lot has changed in my stance on the Westbrook situation since he went to the bench. And you said it, like the plus minus still is what it is. It's still shit. They lose the minutes when he plays, like, and now it's against second units. So you tell me if that's better or worse. Then like it should be easier and it's not. So so should you maximize LeBron's window? Of course, right? And they should trade Westbrook if they could for a return that would accomplish that. Turner and Hield doesn't do it. I guess like you could make the case to me, and I might buy it, that they really shouldn't care about those picks that much. But it's still, you're just digging deeper. You're just digging the hole deeper if you move those picks for a return that gets you what? Like you're in the, they're just not going to be better than the play-in, I don't think. And that's assuming, Hield and Turner both work great, work as expected, provide the shooting they don't have, right? Even Turner defends the rim, lets AD play the 4 and roam, which he wants to do. Then it's like, well, LeBron still has to stay healthy and be, top 5 MVP level. And then it's like Anthony Davis still has to stay healthy and not have these multiple week stretches where he just isn't the guy that he needs to be. He's been better lately. I mean, to be honest, I know this is such a hot take, but like, I really am coming around more to, if you're trying to do something that like meaningfully changes the Lakers outlook, not this year, but gets you out of like, you're consigned to some rough years after LeBron's gone. I think the Davis trade does make sense. I think that's how he's your only positive value asset that you can actually trade. So like, if you're just going to be cold and calculated about it, like that's the way forward. But that doesn't do anything for you this year, because you're not getting back a player as good as AD in a trade involving AD this year, I don't think. So do they trade Westbrook? No, it's just, it doesn't, nothing about his changed role other than perhaps the perception that he's been better, which I don't think is really meaningful, in reality. It doesn't do enough. It doesn't do enough to improve the team this year. It doesn't make him a title contender, which if you're going to give up 2 first rounders, which are the only 2 you have, then it needs to be that significant.
What I was going to ask though, would you do if Charlotte just said, we're bottoming out and we want this money off the books, and it's Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier for Russ and no picks?
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely.
You would do. I'd probably do it too, just because you're getting rid of the cap space then, but at least you're saving your picks. I don't know if I was Charlotte, I would just consider it, because I know cap space and free agency in a market like Charlotte, yada, 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 but you can still use that cap space to acquire players in trades. And just like, I would be more about, I mean, would you do it for 1 first round pick for the Lakers?
I don't think so. Just because then the other thing I would want to know, which you can't tell me and no one can, is who's the guy that they think they're going to sign if they open up space, right? And next summer, the Lakers, I mean. So, because if you put Hayward, doesn't Hayward has another year on his deal after this one? Is that right? Or am I mistaken on that?
He has another year left. Yes.
So then you're not signing anybody basically, unless you flip him somehow. So yeah, I don't, if it's just players for player, yeah, I would just to have Russ off the team and have like 2 guys that can play like a normal style. I would do that for sure. But I don't want to give up the picks too, because I think those are just the only remaining lifelines for the Lakers.
One fun development before you get started: the Lakers are plus 10.4 points per 100 possessions when AD plays without Russ or LeBron. There's a lot of Troy Brown Jr. and Lonnie Walker the fourth going and Austin Reeves going on in those minutes, and it's working apparently.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Nothing. It's one of the only things that works. So we got the Memphis Grizzlies next. And I love a rhetorical question. Why can't the Grizzlies win the West? This is like a big macro question because there's just too many little interesting Grizzlies things that I wanted to touch on. So I'm going to just do that now. So last year, right? They won 56. It felt like an overachievement, but their point differential suggested like they won the correct number of games last year. So you're getting Jaren Jackson back tonight. We're recording this Tuesday. You're also losing Desmond Bane for 2 to 3 weeks, which sucks because I'm going to pump him up here in a minute. But you get Jackson back, and I think that upgrades the defense significantly because he finally made the strides last year that everybody wanted to see. And they were fifth on defense last year. Memphis was. They're 17th now. Maybe Jackson gets them into the top 10, and we stop caring so much about Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton not being there. Zaire Williams is another guy that they've had success putting on smaller guards. He can, he's long, he's quick. You can use him that way. Whatever you think he's going to be long-term is fine. But right now he's a helpful defensive player. He hasn't played yet. So you've got the defense, I think, potentially back up to last year's levels. And you have John Morant has leveled up. I think Bane should be in the most improved conversation after he was in it last year. I mean, just you can.
Is he the pick to win that award right now? By the way,
I mean,
I think he is.
There's someone. Oh, I saw SGA listed, which was like,
that's
pretty much always been this good. He's just playing again, and everybody remembered him.
That's a fair point too.
Well, I think I don't know. I needed to see the longer list, but Bane is just like it's not just the points per game, right? Because he went from 8 to 18, and now he's up around 24. But it's all the self creation, right? That's just the game changer because now we've alluded to it with other teams when Morant breaks the defense down, which he just always does because now they have to guard him on the perimeter and that makes it easier. And the ball comes out if Morant doesn't finish it. Now there's Bane who's like, well, he's going to fake you off your feet and either hit, a step in three, or he'll just put it on the floor and you can run pick and rolls with him. He can get to it. He's just a completely, overhauled offensive player in terms of just self-sufficiency, right? He's getting to the foul line more. He's second on the team in drives per game, which is just that was not part of his makeup at all.
Right.
So I guess it's a rhetorical question but it's just the situation of, I think we saw some pullback, right, from Memphis. I feel like that was the reasonable preseason position to take. I don't know, man. I think there's a recipe here where, like you said, there's some good teams in the West. There's some that shouldn't be there towards the top of the standings. There's some that will get there that aren't there now. But nobody looks. I mean, Phoenix is probably but they've got a bunch of injuries, right, and they don't have Jay Crowder. The Grizzlies just
Paul, right Cam, yeah,
it's right there for the Grizzlies. I think it's right there. So I guess I'm walking back my expectation that maybe Memphis was going to take a small step back before getting back on that upward trajectory.
Was wrong about the Memphis Grizzlies, and I'm sorry. For the fourth consecutive year, Grizzlies fans should want me to smash their under because it just means that your team is going to be amazing. I don't have an argument against why they can't win the West now. It would have been there was a lot of early season defensive noise for them. Mm-hmm. That's picked up. They've gotten better, and you're getting Jaren Jackson Jr. back. It sucks that you're losing Bane, of course, with that toe injury. They were winning games even when John Morant went through that. He's been going through this spell for the past 2 weeks. So I was doing the MVP ladder. I had to bump him down under 30%, under 31% on threes, under 67% at the foul line. Very weird, just for a 2-week span. Doesn't fucking matter. The Grizzlies are still just hanging around there. Fun Desmond Bane stat though, because you mentioned the self-creation, and I think he's gotten a lot better as a passer, even though there can be some turnover issues when he's doing more slowed down stuff. But among every single player who has finished at least 50 pick and roll possessions this year, so there's 59 players who have finished it with a turnover or a shot, or a free throw, 50 pick and roll possessions. Desmond Bane is second in effective field goal percentage, behind only Steph Curry. That is bonkers.
And so
That's
that's tied
bonkers.
into this one, which Curry and Donovan Mitchell are the only players making more than Bane's 2.5 pull-up three attempts, 2.5 pull-up threes per game. And Mitchell is, again, this is a day old, was shooting 52.2% on pull-up threes. Bane's at 52.1. So of like he's arguably the best pull-up three-point shooter. I mean, everybody knows it's Steph Curry, but like that's it, right? Pick and roll is real nasty when if you don't get over that, he's just going to pull, and that's how you get an effective field goal percentage that high. Yeah, it's absurd. It's hard to think of a guy that like this is the type of growth, or like just 2/3 of this is the type of growth that like the Hawks wanted to see from DeAndre Hunter, or just like or the Suns in a minute want to see from Mikal Bridges. Just be good with the ball, you know? And it's a really hard leap to make, especially if you kind of came up as like a spot up guy, which is it's wild. Yeah, the Grizzlies are really good.
If I had to come up with an answer though, why they wouldn't
Yeah.
win the West, I would just be curious whether we still believe that their offense scales to a playoff setting. They're 6th overall in offense. Once again, first in offensive rebounding rate. I still don't think they take enough threes. Like you have Bane and even John Morant sort of firing away, and having the element of look, some of the young guys have come in and they've been a lot better than I would have expected. Dylan Brooks continues to take threes. You have John Conchar when he comes in during his minutes, like he's going to fire him up. Like David Roddy, Jake Larivia, they've all given you 3-point attempts, but just like this team could stand to make more 3-pointers. They're not getting to the rim a ton relative to a team that has John Morant. They don't get to the foul line right now a bunch. And so do they have just sort of that, playoff gear in the offense? I think the answer more so than ever is yes. But like, once again, this team is 6th in offense overall. Their half court offense is 24th. So like it is a concern. Does Jaren Jackson Jr. make that better? Does having Zaire Williams make that better? I might lean towards Jaren Jackson Jr. Like maybe is where I would land on that.
The other thing to your point, I think they're again tops in the league in offensive rebound rate, and it's even higher. It's 33.6% this year, 32.7% when they led the league last year. That's the low hanging fruit that like playoff defenses just they play bigger and they actually box out. And Steven Adams doesn't just get to do whatever he wants under there. So I think that's another, if you're looking for reasons, it's like that's something that Memphis is, I mean, incomparably great at, is getting second chance opportunities. They're just harder to come by, I think, in a playoff series. Especially if you think this team's going to win the West, then they should play 3 playoff rounds, right? Like it's just going to get harder for them to pile up points that way.
One team, can you guess it, not to put you on the spot, is averaging more points per possession after grabbing their own miss in the NBA.
Ooh.
Who is it?
It's
not, I'll give you one hint. It's not the Pelicans.
Damn it. No, I have no idea. Who is it?
The Rockets.
Oh,
it's not so much that their best offense is a missed shot. It's that so much of their offense is missed shots.
Sure. Way to take a shot. Thank you everybody for listening to the Western Conference portion of our biggest questions. I'm sure Dan will chop this up somehow. God, I hope so. I don't know if I could listen to all this. That's going to do it for us this week. We'll do the East next week. Thanks for listening. Remember, guys, or guys and gals, anybody in the Discord, however you'd like to be referred to, remember to download, subscribe, comment, interact with us, engage with us. We've got all of our socials, and you can join our Discord. Information for that's on the YouTube and podcast description. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars, give us like 14 stars if you can figure out a way to do that. Tell your friends and enemies. I would like to close, as always, by apologizing to Jared Allen, and on behalf of Dan and also me, because I like him too, shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina.
The solution to we were trying to figure out how the Mavericks can be less dependent on Luka.